We're not just here to reflect the converged AV/IT industry, we're here to change it, to shape it. So the conversations that we have, the challenges that we share, the friendships that we make, perhaps the bonds, they're going to influence the new level of product design, perhaps the new products, and new ways of thinking. None of it will be possible without the incredible Nube team of Cindy Davis, Sue Horwitz, Stephanie Rubin, and Christine Weiser. And of course, our generous sponsors. They are the companies who are taking a leadership role in the industry, in education and training. So I'd like to just recognize them now. So again, thank you so much for attending. I know how busy our days are, our weeks are. It's just so important to get together, share those challenges, network, share best practices, and try to shape what we want of the future with our vendors, giving the feedback that's candid, that truly matters. It's my sincere pleasure to introduce our morning keynote. So just like an international music star who has a new album out, well, this is the first listen. Nothing from our keynote has been released to the public just yet. It's an exclusive just for this summit, just for you. And we have Mike Walker, who's the research director of Gartner. Mike is an author of Hype Cycle for Emerging Technologies. Walker is widely recognized as a strategy and enterprise architecture advisor, industry thought leader, author, and mentor. He's aided global Fortune 100 companies with strategy and enterprise architecture delivery through his mix of unique experience combined with pragmatic approaches. Yes, keeping one foot in the real world. He's served in leadership positions in global top 100 organizations, delivering IT strategy and enterprise transformation initiatives. He serves as a board member at the Open Group. He chairs the Open Group Architecture Forum and Business Architecture Forums. Mike Walker has created an industry-leading reference architecture that has been published in various books and trade publications. It's our sincere pleasure to bring Mike his exclusive analysis of emerging technologies and how they can apply to your school, your enterprise, your organization.
First time we're releasing this year's version of the Emerging Technologies Hype Cycle. This is a publication we do every year. We've been doing it for the past 25 years, analyzing new and emerging technologies and tracking where they're at, how they're relevant to your organization. Keep in mind, we take an industry agnostic view, and that's by design. The reason why we do that is because what we're finding in the industry is that we've got this whole behavior of what I lovingly refer to as Franken models. This combination of business models that we're seeing merge. Great example of this is, companies like Starbucks. So I've got my nice little $6 latte. Well, did you know that Starbucks is also a bank? Starbucks is the #1 mobile payments provider in the US. They sell $6 cups of coffee. Banks do not like that because they're not getting that 2.3% cut on each $6 latte. So what I want to demonstrate for all of you is we're going to give you some industry examples from your world. But what we also want to do is inspire you with what's going on in other industries as well. So let's get into it. Now, why are emerging technologies so important today? Well, the reason why is because the vitality of your organization is rapidly dwindling. The status quo is being significantly challenged. And we've got the data that supports this. What we see is when we look at the S&P index, that the longevity of a company has gone from approximately 60 years to 15 years. And you can see a bit of a trend here. So those old rules on how you defined your business, they don't necessarily apply. If you hop into the business school and listen to the professors pontificate about economic theory, you might hear them talk about we're on the cusp of the next economic long wave. That next economic long wave is what we saw at the turn of the century in the Industrial Revolution. So you might say, well, Mike, that seems like a bit of an exaggeration. Well, one technology we're going to talk about is machine learning. And did you know that 90%, 90% of today's jobs will not be here by 2030 as a direct result of AI? Now, we're not the only ones saying this. The World Economic Forum just did a survey last year, and they said 5 million jobs will be totally eliminated by 2020 as a direct result of AI and machine learning. It's a big deal. Now, when we say 90% of today's jobs won't be here, we're talking about how we classify our jobs today. That doesn't mean the people go away and there's Terminators running around. We don't think that. But what we do know is that we are being significantly augmented. In those knowledge worker tasks that we thought were safe are no longer safe. So if you're focusing on things like process improvement, and that's your go-to strategy, I would highly recommend you rethink that strategy. Because you might be trying to reinvent the supply chain model, which doesn't matter anymore. We now live in digital ecosystems, where it's not just about your value prop, but it's how you connect into the broader range of value props. Fear of change. Embracing change. If you're going to take the strategy of put your fingers in your ears, no, that's not going to work. Trying to standardize everything. What we're probably going to hear from a lot of these vendors is the technology is moving pretty quick at a very, very rapid clip. And what you'll find in the IoT world, the Internet of Things world, is that companies cannot catch up with those standards. And what happens is they start to standardize on 30-year technology, when the next wave of technology that's really going to provide you business benefit, they're completely missing the boat. So be careful not to over-engineer standardization within your organization. Now, I don't want to be all doom and gloom here. There are an enormous amount of opportunities for all of you. Enormous amount of opportunities that emerging technologies is going to open up for you. Now, keep in mind, when we talk about these opportunities, the emerging technology is a source of inspiration. It is not the solution. There's a very subtle meaning behind that. Meaning, you don't want to just say, hey, look, I heard Mike talk, he flapped his gums for about an hour and he told us about AI and how it's going to change the world, so let's just spin up a bunch of AI projects. No, what we're saying is use it as a source of inspiration to have a dialogue with your business and say, hey, I know we've been conducting our business this way for the past 15 years, but is that going to sustain us for the next 15 years? And the answer might just be no. And again, we've got lots of data behind this. So as Gartner, we love our data. When we look at venture capital-backed companies, we see a significant trend. The trend is those venture-backed companies, they make their returns. But when you look at traditional companies, we're not seeing that same sort of competitive behavior. So it's about creating new markets. It's not about those existing markets. And no industry is immune. So if you think, well, I'm in government, that doesn't apply to me. Or I'm in education, that doesn't apply to me. I'm going to strongly encourage you to stop thinking that way. We've got a lot of clients in the education space. And when I talk with CIOs in universities, they're scared to death. And they tell me this, look, Mike, we're not worried about people downloading movies anymore and music and piracy and all that great stuff. My job is to protect the student body. And I can't do that because I've got all these devices connected to my network. I can't see what's going on. Yes, it's saturating my lines, but most importantly, we don't know what's going on and where that next vulnerability is going to come into our university. It's a big, big deal. You take a company like Airbnb, less than a decade old. They were valuated at $30 billion. You almost have to put your pinky up to your face when you say that. $30 billion. It's okay to laugh at my cheesy jokes, by the way. My wife does it all the time. So when you look at Airbnb compared to Hilton, Marriott, they're blowing them away, and they don't own a single asset. So if they went to head-to-head in a new market, who do you think is going to have the advantage? Airbnb. The whole notion of a shared economy. And there's many, many others. One other that I'll highlight is Tesla. Tesla's a great example, not because they've got really, really cool cars, but what they did is they challenged a century-old business model. If you go in a time machine, you go back 5 years. None of the big automotive companies had electric vehicles, and they certainly didn't have autonomous vehicles on their roadmaps. At least not on a production line roadmap. Yeah, they've had them in their R&D lab. Ford has been dabbling in autonomous vehicles since the 80s. Yes, that's great. But their core business model was still the same from the very beginning. Tesla comes around, and what do they say? They say, look, we're not going to play by those rules. We're going to redefine this market. We're going to go here. Yes, we've got no experience in this space, but we're going here. And oh, by the way, yes, there are legal requirements for me to go through a dealership. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to launch this thing like an iPhone. Come after us if you've got a problem with it. These startups are playing also by a different set of rules. And so you have to understand that as well as you start to go into these new types of business models, that they're not playing by the rules that you've been playing by either, even though it may be the law. Uber is a great example of this as well. So what is that going to require you to do? What is the next big rule? It's the pace of innovation has to be pretty fast within your organization. I talked to one, I can't name the client, they're a high-tech vendor. I love the term that they used. They said just-in-time architecture. They went from, we need to spend 6 months architecting the perfect solution, doing all this vendor due diligence, et cetera, to a rapid prototyping type of environment. And actually, now that I think about it, I just talked to a 150-year-old insurance company. And what they do is they say, look, we've got these great ideas. Let's partner with an outside firm that can create all these great prototypes with this emerging technology. Bring it back in, and we'll test out, see if it is viable for our company. So there is not going to be a silver bullet answer on how to solve this particular problem. You have to figure out what's going to work best within your organization. Because here's the issue. We see these technologies and how they're tracking. Exponential growth. And there's 4 key things that are enabling this. 1, ubiquity. Everything's connected. 2, we've got more data than we've ever had. So as of 2006, there was more information created than previously in the history of humanity. Now, big data without big insights is a big problem. You have to know what to do with that data. The Google autonomous vehicle generates 1 terabyte of data per second. Now, yes, there's probably all sorts of great ways to figure out how to monetize that or sell it back to other companies, et cetera. But you're going to have to figure out what data is critical for you. So, shameless plug. So here's where our research comes in. The emerging technologies hype cycle, we look at around 2,200 to 2,500 technologies, uniquely named technologies, and we profile those technologies, and we want to understand 3 things. We want to understand what is their market position, represented by hype in the marketplace. 2, we want to understand the velocity of these technologies. We want to understand how rapidly are they maturing and are going to be safe for you to implement within your organization. Now be careful with that word safe, though. because safe isn't necessarily good. And third, the impact. What we see is the impact on the marketplace based on what we see from research labs in academia, what we see from our big evil vendors, and I can say that because I been part of several big evil vendors, but also clients like yourselves and what you're doing in your labs. We triangulate that information. We say, look, this is the likely impact on you as an industry. So when we look at the hype cycle as a whole, I mean, it can be a little overwhelming looking at that hype cycle. So what we've done is we've distilled this down into 3 key megatrends. The first megatrend is artificial intelligence everywhere. All the other trends that I'm going to talk to you about, all the other technologies that I'm going to talk about, use algorithms in some way. There's not a single one that doesn't. And I would bet you're using AI without even knowing it. When you go onto Bing or Google, you're using algorithms to help you with that. Your weather, algorithms, et cetera. We're finding it as a highly pervasive technology. Now, keep in mind, there's been a big promise around AI. We've been talking about this since the 50s and 60s. And we haven't realized any of that promise. However, through the years, what we found is machine learning, which is a branch of artificial intelligence. So there's two pieces of artificial intelligence. One, general purpose AI, which is like the Jetsons or Terminators or whatever. These are fully autonomous. Any situation they can react to. Narrow AI is when you give it a problem and it does really well at working autonomously for that particular problem. Highly, highly scoped. Machine learning is a form of that. Now, machine learning even was a bit of a pipe dream because we didn't have 2 of those key components. We didn't have the compute power component. We didn't have mature algorithms. But third, we didn't have the data. And when you look at AI projects, it's a data science project. It's not a coding problem. So if you think you're going to get a bunch of programmers to crank out some AI apps, no, largely data-based. That's where deep learning has really started to evolve and where we're seeing tons of different applications around deep learning. And I'm going to get into some of those examples here in a minute. But first, with machine learning, this is unique. So when we look at machine learning, we see it at the peak of the hype cycle, which means the early adopters are embracing these technologies and making it a viable solution. The fast followers, the type B companies, are rapidly trying to catch up. Typically, a technology at the peak would be at a 5 to 10 year or 10 years plus type of velocity. With machine learning, we see it's 2 to 5 years. So what does that tell us? It tells us that this technology is maturing very, very rapidly. Every mega vendor that we talk to, it is on every one of their roadmaps as a serious commitment. You could arguably say IBM has essentially bet the farm on Watson. Because when you look at all their other technologies in their portfolio, everything comes back to that one technology. So there's big bets made by Oracle, Microsoft, IBM around this whole algorithmic way of doing things. Keep in mind, like I said before, this isn't a programming problem. I want to give you also the warning. If you thought platform lock-in was bad, be prepared for cloud lock-in or intellectual property lock-in. The value out of this isn't going to be downloading a bunch of open source libraries that Google has donated or Facebook has donated. It's about writing on digital platforms. Now, it's bittersweet. Yes, I've got all this great capability, and I've got all this great data environment where I can merge all this stuff together. But keep in mind, you're going to be locked in to a degree. So some examples. You might not realize it, but some of the stores that you go into, retail stores, might have cameras in their mannequins' eyes. And they're looking at you, and they're trying to figure out, did you really like that dress? This is real pilots that are going on right now. So you go in the store, you're looking at the mannequin and go, don't like it. You walk away. Well, they've got eye beacons throughout the store. They know who you are. They know what you like and don't like in real time. Also, since you've got their app in your pocket, they know all your preferences, and they can give you recommendations on where to go in the store based on your disgust of that dress, right? Now, in application and university settings, I'm working with clients that are using it for something very, very interesting, much less creepy than this. But looking at, so if I'm a professor and I'm speaking to all the students pontificating, they've got cameras that are looking at each one of the students, and they're trying to figure out, are they engaged or not? How well are they engaged? And what these universities are trying to do is not spy on students and slap people around, but rather they want to create custom learning plans. Because what they've realized is every person learns in a slightly different way. And sometimes the student doesn't know this. A lot of times they don't know this. So they use it as a tool to really start to connect in a very material way with the student body. So that's a really cool use of the technology. In medical university scenarios, we're seeing, this is a breast cancer sample, where we're seeing oncologists and machine learning algorithms have competitions against each other, figure out who can spot the most cancer cells. In this particular case, the oncologist got a 60%, and the AI got 110%, because the control folks missed a couple, and the AI caught those for them as well. The University of Cincinnati, for all of our Ohio people. Now, I'm not exactly sure how they got to this point to understand this baseline, but what they're saying with their machine learning pilot is that they can predict a teenage suicide with an 80% confidence threshold. I mean, this is material.
From how far out?
I think it was 2 years. Yeah. So that's all published on the University of Cincinnati's website. Yeah. Now, I could speak to you guys for 3-4 hours on just this one technology. There are endless use cases around this technology, from Foxconn, who makes all the iPhones, laying off 60,000 people, 60,000, and replacing them with smart robots that self-learn, that use a form of machine learning called reinforcement learning, to Amazon and what they're doing with drone technology, or a mining and operations company that I spoke to that's using deep learning algorithms to take drones, hover over work sites, and analyze what people are doing. Not as a security measure, not to reactively slap people around, but rather they want to predict, based on your current behavior, what is the likelihood of an incident in the near future. Now, they've already communicated, based on their pilots, a 40% success rate so far in their initial pilot. That's hitting the bottom line. Workers' compensation, the workforce being out, getting people back in, etc. It's a big, big deal. If you like pizza, Domino's Pizza, they say they're a technology company now, so now they're delivering pizzas with cute little drones, both aerial and land-based. Or if you want to save the environment, we've got aquatic drones that are going in, I don't know how they're figuring out what's the good vegetation, but they're finding the bad vegetation and they're zapping the bad vegetation so the good vegetation has an opportunity to thrive within the Great Barrier Reef, as an example. Or if you talk to Rolls-Royce, building completely autonomous ships with no one on the ships, all controlled by either the self-driving component or within their command center, which is all controlled by AR and VR. So pretty exciting stuff. Another key technology within this whole megatrend is virtual assistants. Huge investments, especially in the financial services world. So if you followed what's going on with Bank of America created a new app called Erica. And Erica is a virtual assistant in your pocket. She's a high wealth financial advisor for you, just for you. And what she will do for you is she will proactively look at your accounts and tell you where there's potential issues. She'll also look at the market and say, look, the interest rates went down. Maybe you could save a point on your mortgage if you refi now. And they also want to get it to a point where it's a one-click shopping experience, like Amazon. So you want a mortgage? Why wait 45 days and a whole lot of cramped hands from signing? Why can't we do this in one click? Because we've already got all your financial data. Now we're seeing this. This is another university example. So this is using IBM Watson to help diagnose cancer patients and provide treatment options. And what you see here is the AI is telling us, with this level of confidence, here's the treatment plans we recommend. So at any area where you're going to have some sort of decisioning, we see an opportunity for machine learning to come in to help supplement you. And I'm being very deliberate with my words when I say supplement and not replace. I often get the question of, so Mike, when does my boss start to not trust my opinion and go with the machine learning? Well, here's the challenge. You can't sue that application, but you can sue a doctor. So until the laws change and the accountabilities change, there's always going to be a human in the mix. And that's fairly universal across the board. We see this in social services. So this is more of a conversational-based AI. So next. There we go. So the state of Texas. And I think this is through UT, the University of Texas. They've got a social app that helps students with particular social issues, whether it be at home or in the classroom, bullying, etc. And so there's so many different applications of how you can use virtual assistants. Now, one thing you're going to see throughout, like I talked about before, AI is really the backbone of all these technologies. And I'm not going to geek out on you guys and go through all the technical detail, but you're going to see three major forms of machine learning. And here's the Reader's Digest version of that. Supervised learning equals we know what good looks like, i.e., find me dogs in the park playing. Those algorithms are really great at that. Unsupervised learning is, I don't really know what the answer is, but I need to figure out where would be an ideal place to put a food truck. Unsupervised learning is going to help you there because you don't necessarily know what that end picture looks like. And reinforcement learning is a more trial and error based algorithm that's used quite a bit in things like search engines or robotics. When we talk about these self-learning robots, we see that technology used there. So you're going to see this when we go through these other technology and these other trends, key components being used across the board. So the second key megatrend, transparently immersive experiences. That's a mouthful. What we're seeing is that every wall has a potential of being a screen or a sensor. Every table, every chair. We're not going to, our generation will probably notice this, but future generations won't necessarily notice that compute is in everything and is pushed to the edge. So when we say immersive and transparent experiences, what we mean by is you don't know that it's there. You're just going about your business. It's immersive because it's deeply ingrained. So how we think about things like facilities management. I'm talking to facility management companies right now where they're saying, look, I want sensors in every chair. And I want to be able to say posture, whole 9 yards, and not give it to a facilities manager, but give it directly to the end person. Oh, the room isn't your ideal temperature, and you're the only one in the room. Well, why should you go to the thermostat? Why don't we just automatically change it for you? And this is a direct result of processing, algorithms, data being pushed to the edge. So I would strongly recommend to you guys when you're thinking about those solutions. And if you've got a mobility strategy, think about that mobility strategy in the terms of the person itself. Not a laptop, not a phone, a wearable, or inside the person itself. Human augmentation is one of the fastest moving technologies that we've been tracking. So if you see all the interesting things that are happening in Google X Labs, where you've got contact lenses that can tell you immediately what your blood pressure is, your glucose levels, be able to transmit AR directly from a lens in your eye. Crazy, crazy stuff. Now, you'll probably find we're going to up this number because every year we up this number. But the safe number is we predict 30 billion of these devices will be in the marketplace by 2020. And as you can see, every industry is included here. And these devices keep getting smarter and smarter. I talked to one vendor that has a digital stethoscope that when you put it to your heart, it knows that it's your heart and it knows what is good for you versus academically what's good. So if you naturally have heart palpitations, it knows that, and it's going to look at your specific heart palpitation and say, is this within the range of normal for your condition specifically? To do that, they have to have algorithms on that specific device. And so you're just going to continue to find this is going to be more and more pervasive. And in the entertainment industry, AV industry, we're going to find that when we talk about experiences, is we're going to use these devices to create an interactive experience. So when I talk to entertainment companies, which I wish I could name, we talk about if you're watching a TV show, wouldn't it be great, and I'm just going to pick an example because it's on right now, Game of Thrones, wouldn't it be great if I could interact with that content? What would that look like? How could I supplement the content that's on the screen with an experience that I can have myself? And so it's not about passive experience. It's about interaction. So augmented reality. That's a key enabling technology that is just skyrocketing right now. And when we look at it from a business perspective, they're doing the same thing that companies like Tesla are doing. They're redefining going to the movies. In this case, going to a soccer game, or where that's at a football game. Where why would I ever go to Wembley when I can just sit on my couch and all my relatives that are around the world, they can all join me virtually as well. If I'm a medical student, why should I have to deal with the smell of a human cadaver when I can have Microsoft HoloLens and I can virtualize the entire body right there, lift it up, slice and dice it, see in real time what a body would do? And I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. I don't want to give too much away. But when we look at the impact here, it's a transformative impact on the marketplace. And every industry that we talk to is embracing these technologies. Now, when you look at the hype cycle, you'll find that it's in the trough of disillusionment. You guys might not know what that fancy, pithy word means. Essentially what it means is the market has seen all this great hype of this technology and it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But now, since we've been implementing it, we find out not all of those promises were an actual reality. So this is a good point to be using this technology because it's been proven and you can have realistic expectations of what to get from that technology. So you're not just focusing on the latest trade publication. If it was at the peak of the hype, they'd be like, oh, well, it's all this great goodness, rainbows and unicorns. Now we actually know where the market viability is because the type A companies, those innovators like Tesla, like Airbnb, like Uber, et cetera, have created their competitive differentiation. The type B companies that are fast followers have adopted those technologies. And now the type C companies, which are more of the conservative companies, are starting to adopt them at this stage. So that's how you start to interpret these hype cycles. So here's some examples. So Apple what they've done, this is important about what Apple has done. They've essentially put AR into everybody's pockets that owns an iPhone. That is a game changer. Bigger than Pokemon Go and all these other kind of fads. This is a huge deal. And we continue to see, the one I can talk about is IKEA, where you can virtualize. If this room had no tables, I could take ARKit and I could virtualize all these tables and maybe even you in it. I could have a digital ruler and I could put my phone up and say, tell me the distance from here to here, down to a millimeter accuracy, and see that virtual tape measure running across the room. This is a game changer. Now, they're not the only vendor in this game, but they're the ones that have the most impact because of how ingrained the technology is within the consumer market. So if you're in India and you want to view houses, there's companies that you can put virtual reality headsets on, and you can actually take a tour of these homes. Or if you're in the city of Las Vegas, you can walk the Vegas Strip. A company called UTour allows you to visit Vegas, Venice, Rome, London, etc. Kind of a semi-total recall scenario without all the baggage and, Arnold. But what's also really cool is amusement parks. And what they're doing is, yes, there's, where I live in, south of Cleveland, Ohio, where Six Flags there, they have a roller coaster where you put a VR headset on and you can kind of go around. That's great. But really where the game changer is where they have a blank canvas of a room or a maze, and you can dynamically render a haunted house for Halloween. You could render it as something else during Christmas or whatever it may be. And so how we look at that style of entertainment, again, has changed. And so when you talk with companies like, Walt Disney, they've already put in the press that they're already looking to create these magical experiences. Below are just some of the vendors and the industries they're in. Even some that are surprising, things like mental health, legal, all sorts of different industries that are utilizing this technology. In the mental health space, there's a Dutch company that is trying to help you with phobia. So if you're scared of spiders, they want to use virtual reality to help you with that particular problem. Or if you're afraid of flying, they can help you with that particular problem. Let's see here, what else? Things like engineering. So if you want to create a jet engine, if you're GE, if you're Boeing or Lockheed Martin, and you want to have a more dynamic interaction with that design process. In this case, I've got the medical community, the molecular engineering community. It gives you a level of richness that you wouldn't have had before. So as an example, when all of us flew here, there was most likely a part on your plane made by GE that was built using this technology combined with 3D printing. And it's a very simple part. It's this big. It's a fuel regulator. And they're using materials that they wouldn't have been able to use with traditional engineering techniques. And they wouldn't have created that same kind of construct without actually 3D printing it. And it's saving airlines 25% in fuel costs. Something as simple as a part this big is saving Delta and others millions of dollars. So that's the potential value prop of this type of technology. Smart Workspace is another key technology here in this immersive experience type of trend. And when we talk about smart workspaces, what we're talking about are spaces that interact with you. It's taking the promise of IoT and events that occur and combining those two worlds together in a meaningful way. Now, where we see that on the hype cycles, we see that still is pretty early days. IoT as a technology is further along, but actual application of this technology or this concept is still fairly early on. So we still recommend that companies pilot and prototype these technologies and figure out how you can interact that with other systems within your environment. So 3 key things here to think about. One is the information that you're able to gather and how you use that. So if you've got a meeting room, how can you create those compelling experiences? Or maybe even not even need the meeting room. What if it's your home office? How can we create a new experience for our employees? Now keep in mind, if you don't have this on your roadmap yet, you definitely should, which is not a technology trend, but a behavioral trend, which is we've got a new generation that's coming into the workforce that is demanding, not requesting, demanding, I want to work on my stuff, my apps, my data, when I want, and how I want. Great example of this, I'm not a millennial, but Gartner didn't give me that MacBook Pro. They didn't give me my phone in my pocket. They didn't give me my Apple Watch. But I'm using it for company purposes. So you have to figure out how you're going to embrace the next wave of leaders that are going to come into your organization. Because it's not if, it's when. And it's not just your industry. I'm talking to, of all industries, the military. They're scared to death. And what it means for them in a very command and control environment, and where the next generation is entrepreneurial. I'm not even going to say entitled, because it's not necessarily entitled. It's an entrepreneurial type of mindset. So I'm going to go pretty quick. I've got my 15-minute marker. The next big mega trend is digital platforms. This is the thing that you don't necessarily see or recognize if you're not within IT. However, this is the new IT reality. All this other stuff that I've been talking about is very, very hard to do if you don't have a digital platform strategy. And it's really combining multiple aspects. It's a platform that is largely driven by artificial intelligence that helps you interact within a mesh-style architecture, embracing that your customers and how they'll use your technology is going to dramatically change because compute and solutions have pushed the edge. So it's not necessarily about that great portal that you built, but do you have a mobile version of that? And can I interact with it on my watch, etc. The things, IoT and other types of sensors, being able to embrace that, it changes your architecture fundamentally. Things like data privacy. I'll tell you a little horror story. And I can't name the company, but you could probably do a Google search and find them. This particular company, they had a health and wellness program. And part of their health and wellness program, they said, look, why don't we give everyone Fitbits and we'll gamify this and maybe everyone will get healthier. Sounds like a great idea. They talked to the insurance company. The insurance company was like, look, we'll give you a discount on your premiums if you do these wellness programs. Fantastic. Company has less sick people. People are healthier, saving some money, win-win situation. Well, the company went through some financial hard times. And they knew they had to lay off some employees. So they took a bit of a controversial approach to laying off their employees. What they did was they said, look, why don't we fire all the lazy people? You can imagine how that went over. Class action lawsuit later. But what they found out through this entire process is that there wasn't an actual law that was broken, because the laws weren't written for those specific use cases and those technologies. Same thing in the medical field. When you sign, you give consent. But in the app, there's a checkbox. When I click check and I agree, does that equal consent? Because wait a second, signatures are consent, and you've got these checkboxes and EULAs and all this other stuff. Slow down, guys. Huge debates on these specific usages of technology. So take a step back, look at the social and ethical issues that these introduce now as a result. And what you're going to find is if you thought service-oriented architecture was dead, I'm sorry, it's not. It's just a bit more complex. It's not about creating an Uber enterprise service bus in the cloud. Now we've got to worry about event-driven architectures. And when we talk about mesh app and service architecture, we're talking about you live within a digital hive. And everything has the opportunity to talk to everything else. And that's where we start to get into concepts like microservices, serverless computing, etc. And so that's a key tenet of digital platforms. Now this is a topic, blockchain, that I wish I had a ton more time to talk to you guys about. But unfortunately I don't. But blockchain is one of those technology trends that we feel is very, very underrated. Because with blockchain, it's really about these three components. The first is traceability. Understanding when I make a transaction, do I know where it is and where it has been? It changes how we've traditionally have done this. But it's also got this concept of an irrevocable record. Meaning, has this record been tampered with? And so with the blockchain architecture, I can understand each chain in that block, when it's been altered, how it's been altered. I've got that trust built in. But lastly is the trust component. And this is really the differentiator between our current technologies that we see, well, we've got it secure. It's all going through SSL or it's going through a secure environment. But actually being able to prove trust within the architecture. This is largely using algorithms to help us with this problem. So this is an unsupervised learning combined with some reinforcement learning algorithms that's helping us do this. And so when I talk about some of these use cases, I'll give you one extreme. Land titles in Honduras. The Honduras government is actually using blockchain to understand who actually owns the property and who doesn't own the property. Because if you're in a third world country like Honduras, your livelihood is dependent on you owning land because you can't get any other financial help without having some sort of collateral. So this is critical to their population. I don't want to get into a political conversation, but there has been questions about our voting system and how secure it is, etc. Well, we're seeing vendors now come up with voting machines using blockchain for that particular scenario. And so whether it's these kind of edge cases, or it's currency, or it's a authentication for security, or e-citizen ID, or you're passing back and forth music, land titles, books, any sort of communication you are going to do that needs to be secured and trusted, blockchain is a candidate technology to help you solve that problem. That's why this technology is so important, is because it could be one of the key foundations of your IT architecture. So much so that I'm talking to telecoms as an example. And they're saying, hey, why don't we put blockchain at the telco level? Instead of you guys having to worry about it and putting it into your infrastructures, why don't we put that into ours and we'll offer that back as a service to all of you? So that's the level of momentum we're seeing with blockchain as an architecture. Digital twins. Have you guys heard of digital twins? No? So digital twins is an interesting concept because really what we're trying to do with digital twins, and this is largely an Industry 4.0 type of concept. Digital twins is essentially saying, I want to take an object, a person, and I want to make them digital. And so if you take an airplane, let's say Delta Flight 2150, going from JFK to London Heathrow. Wouldn't it be great if we had a digital twin that I could see in real time? What is the temperature of the plane? What's the weight? What's the wind resistance? Let's run some scenarios and see if this wind shear happens, what would happen to the plane? And so companies like Boeing, Siemens, NASA are all using the digital twin concept to help improve. And that's where that fuel regulator came in, using digital twin type of concepts to run simulations within their environment. Now, an enormous amount of data. So I talked about the Google autonomous vehicle, 1 terabyte of data per second. We're talking about that type of data that's going to be generated. And this can be done both in real time, when the object is in that space, but where it's been largely beneficial is in the design time space. When we're trying to design solutions, we see digital twin technology really starting to take off. We talked about those. Imagine a city. So Singapore is actually trying to fully digitize their cities using the digital twin concept. Dubai does it to a certain extent with how they reuse water. So in Dubai, they reuse 75% of all water. It's pretty crazy, huh? Yeah. So that's the digital twin concept. Many more technologies fit within these megatrends that, frankly, don't have enough time to go through. But when the hype cycle is already out and you can read the detail around all the stuff that we've talked about here today, those are the 3 key megatrends. AI everywhere, transparently immersive experiences, and digital platforms. Some honorable mentions with digital platforms would be technologies like quantum computing. Companies like Microsoft and IBM are making significant investments in this space. And quantum computing is real in a small scale. Large scale, less so. But it's one that has dramatic impacts to your environment. Meaning, one meaning would be security. So if you look at encryption, it's 128 bits encryption or whatever the bits are. It's really not about those bits of encryption. It's about having a computer strong enough to crack the encryption. That's why the NSA is so concerned about quantum computing. That every transaction you do could be impacted in a dramatic way as a result of just that one technology. So, I want to leave you with a story. It's a story about the ice maker. So back in the mid-1800s, if you wanted ice, you had to go to lakes in the northern hemisphere when it's very, very cold, cut that ice out of the lake, frozen style. I've got kids, so I've seen frozen quite a few times. Cut the ice out of the lake. Technology advancement came. And at the turn of the century, the Industrial Revolution was a major factor. And what we saw was ice factories. So now where some of these lakes were, we have factories. Now, the question is did the people that was cutting the ice out of the lake, did they go and build factories? No, they didn't. Technology moves on. Ice is a hit. People love lemonade and iced tea. And so we're like, hey, wouldn't it be great to have a refrigerator where I can make my own ice? You might see a trend here. Did the people that built the factories, did they go into the refrigerator business? No, they didn't. So the lesson for you guys is don't be the ice maker. Keep an eye out for what is the next big thing. Because that business model that got you here won't necessarily be the one that takes you into the future. And so Wayne Gretzky famously said the secret to his success was he skates to where the puck is going, not where it has been. That's what I want to encourage all of you to think about as you start to think about your strategies and how to embrace these emerging technologies. Forget about today's scenarios and today's business model. But how can you use these as a source of inspiration for that next big business model? And so with that, thank you guys very much. Are we going to do questions?
Some of our people are trying to get into a lot of these things. We're dealing with some healthcare stuff. And the HIPAA laws are just as strict as like classified laws, dealing with classified data. And then in the UK, Google got in trouble for taking more data than they really were supposed to under the agreement. And so how, as the backlash comes for the privacy, how is all that going to affect all this?
Well, you know, a great example of this is when we're implementing these technologies, understanding, you know, really what the law is. So that example when I, talked about, signature versus the checkbox, that's a real scenario. I actually talked to a federal regulator, and she's like, look, this keeps me up at night. A signature and a checkbox keeps me up at night. And that's the challenge, is it is so ambiguous right now. And with all this new data that's being collected, so if I'm able to put sensors on my body, and so it's collecting that data, but also since there's algorithms on these sensors, it's telling me additional data, probability data, like with the heart rate example that I gave. Well, does that still apply to those other types of data? Well, technically it doesn't, right? And a lot of the regulations don't tell you specifically how. Well, they tell you the general purpose. The data should be secure. It should be encrypted in this type of way. But it doesn't tell you what specifically you need to do. And that's part of the ambiguity that we have to work through as an industry, is with these new technologies, they're creating new whats. The hows may apply and they may not apply.
And that's one of the things we're seeing, is that, like, can we use wireless in a room that's doing analytics on HIPAA protected data? Because is that violating the fact that now this data could possibly be picked off by somebody out in the hallway, even though it's not a scenario that's realistic? It's still within the law that you have to follow that.
Yep.
And then even, like, how do you build a room where you're dealing with HIPAA data, like with all these, we want to build the smart room and all the analytics, and we want the smart boards and all the collaborative stuff. Well, you can't really do that and follow the law.
So my recommendation to you, because I've actually worked with a medical device manufacturer on that particular problem, also the federal government as well, because there's a lot of, like the DoD as an example, you can't take anything electronic into meetings, when you go into the Pentagon and all that. And what I've encouraged them to think about, and there has been some success here, but again, it's really going to be dependent on your policymakers within your organization, is think of this less as a security issue. Think of it as a risk issue. And when you think about it from a risk perspective, treat it like you treat any other investment. So if you go to a banker, they're going to use an algorithm that they've been using for 50, 60 years. It's called risk-adjusted value. And essentially, what they're doing is they're taking the benefit component. We're going to make billions of dollars, and marry that with the risk component. And it's your level of risk appetite. Are we willing to have things that are going to impact us reputationally? Well, we've got a low tolerance for that, because we don't want to be on the cover of the Wall Street Journal. Operational risk. Hey, maybe we're willing. We've got a moderate appetite for operational risk. Monetary risk. Hey, if it's going to make us billions of dollars, we'll throw thousands, millions of dollars at this problem. We're okay with that. So it's taking that kind of risk viewpoint on the problem and saying, look, yes, this is that scenario. We're going to get this benefit. It's going to reduce these risks. We've got these remediation strategies that can get us around that, and submit that as a proposal. Make it options-based. So there isn't just one answer. Hey, we've got the t-shirt sizing, small, medium, large solution. The highly risk-adverse, conservative, put a Faraday cage around the room, to, hey, we can create a really great smart environment that connects with their phone. However, we're using these key security technologies to help us mitigate that risk significantly. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So you give me the hook? All right.
Mike,
Again, thank you
so
guys.
much.
Appreciate it.